In this video, we'll be looking at some frogs. Actually, we'll be looking at some multiple choice questions regarding the topic of heart structure and circulation. So let's just dive straight into it. Try the question by yourself and I will explain it immediately after, and hopefully you got it right. So when the left ventricle is relaxed, what is the state of the valves? So what do they mean by relaxed? Since we know the heart is a muscle, relaxed means that it is not contracting, okay? So when they mean the left ventricle is relaxed, it means it is not doing anything. It is not contracting. So during this time, what is the state of the valves? And by state, they mean is the valve open or closed? So we know the heart has two valves, two kinds of valves, atrioventricular valve and semilunar valve. It has two semilunar valves and two atrioventricular valve. So one on each side, because we know the heart has two sides. So this is a cross section of the heart, meaning we cut it open to be able to see what's on the inside. So this is the left side of the heart, and this is the right side of the heart. So on each side there's two ventricles, two valves, see? This valve right here and this valve right here. And then the left side there's this valve here and that valve there. So let's start by finding where the left ventricle is. We know this is the left ventricle. So when the left ventricle is relaxed, what do you think the state of this valve is? By the way, the name of this valve is the semilunar valve, and the name of this valve is the atrioventricular valve. And that makes sense because it's between the atrium and the ventricle. So it's the atrioventricular valve. So when the ventricle is relaxing, so it's not contracting, what is the state of this valve? Since we know the ventricle, when it's contracting, it squeezes blood out through this valve into the aorta, this red pipe, to the rest of the body. So this red pipe carries blood that has been squeezed by the ventricle to the rest of the body that is fresh in oxygen, which means it's basically perfect for the rest of the body to use to survive. So when this is not contracting, do you think this valve will be open or closed? So the answer is it should be closed, because if it's open and the ventricle is not contracting, that means blood will just flow back from the aorta into the heart. And that's not what we want. We want all the fresh blood to leave the heart, to go to the rest of the body. So when the ventricle is not contracting, meaning it's not squeezing out any blood into this pipe through here, called the aorta, then blood will just flow back if it's not contracting and this valve is open. So we got to make sure when this ventricle is relaxing, that this valve is closed, preventing black flow of blood. So we know the semilunar valve is closed. What about the atrioventricular valve? So when the ventricle is relaxing, that means it's not doing anything, which means it's waiting for something. So when the left ventricle is not contracting, it means it doesn't have enough blood. So it's waiting for itself to fill up. And once it's filled up with enough blood, then it will squeeze out the blood through the aorta for the rest of the body. But as long as it's not full, it's not going to do anything. So when it's relaxed, that means it's waiting for something. And in this case, it's waiting for freshly oxygenated blood from the left atrium, because we know the left atrium receives fresh blood from the left and the right lung through the pulmonary veins. So for example, these two pulmonary veins from the right lung will enter these two holes, and the left one will enter these two holes, freshly oxygenated blood that will leave the atrium into the ventricle that is waiting. So in order for the ventricle to receive this blood from the left atrium, this valve must be open, right? So in conclusion, the atrioventricular valve, so this one, is basically open, and this one will be closed. So therefore it's C. Hopefully this made sense. So in order to show you how the IB actually repeats questions, look at the next one. In what position are the atrioventricular and semilunar valves when the ventricle is relaxing? So have you noticed that's the exact same question as this one, just phrased differently. So therefore we know the answer is also C. So bear in mind, if you do enough questions, I guarantee you when your test comes, you won't be surprised by any questions, because the IB runs out of questions to ask. So questions will be the same, just phrased slightly differently. So just do enough questions and I'm sure you're going to get on top. And things will start getting pretty straightforward for you. So let's look at the next one. What is a role of the coronary arteries? Okay, try it by yourself. So the coronary arteries, let me show you. So here I put back the layer of the heart. So all these big pipes coming from the heart, so these big ones, they either leave the heart, so this one leaves the heart to go to the rest of the body to supply it with fresh oxygen, or it could be these pipes, these blue ones, that, so like for example, this blue pipe goes to the lung to get fresh oxygen, this red pipe goes to the rest of the body to give fresh oxygen, and these ones come back from the rest of the body. Okay, so all of these go to or from the heart to your body, whereas there's another kind of vessel called the coronary artery, and that's these small ones here, the red and the blue ones. The blue ones don't have oxygen in them, and the red ones do. So the red ones are supplying the heart with fresh oxygen, whereas the blue ones are the vessels bringing the carbon dioxide that was produced by your cells back to the heart. Okay, so these are called coronary arteries. They supply your heart, because even though your heart is sending blood to everywhere in your body, including your lungs, what is supplying the heart itself? Because if the heart itself doesn't get blood, it will die. So the way that the blood sends blood to itself is through the coronary arteries. Okay, it's these small vessels supplying the heart itself. So what is the role of these arteries? To supply information about blood temperature to the hypothalamus. No, it doesn't do anything with blood temperature to the hypothalamus. This is just wrong. To supply the heart muscle with oxygen and nutrients. That's the one. How about C? To carry blood away from the heart. Technically, it doesn't do that because it's carrying blood to the heart. It's carrying blood to the heart itself to supply itself. So it can't be this one. To monitor blood pH. No, it doesn't do anything to do with pH either. So therefore the answer must be B. Okay, so we got one more question. This diagram everyone gets confused by. So try this question by yourself first. So, and then I'll explain it. So all that this diagram is on the x-axis, so this way, that's time. So as time goes on, something happens. So the y-axis is pressure. So as time goes on, like let's say, start here. So if time goes on this way, what happens to the pressure in certain areas of the heart? So you can see they're looking at the aorta, which we know is this big pipe. They're looking at the left atrium and the left ventricle, in this case. So looking at these two. Because what's happening in the left atrium and left ventricle is very, 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 very similar to what's happening in the right atrium and the right ventricle. So whenever you describe anything that's happening in the left atrium and left ventricle, that's pretty much the same thing that's happening on this side. Okay, so as time goes on, so phase 1, we can see the aorta is losing pressure. Pressure means, a very simple way to define pressure is how full it is, how cramped the specific thing is. And by cramped, I mean like how full of blood, how much pressure is on the vessel itself. Because if it's very empty, there's no pressure. There's nothing forcing it to expand, nothing making it full at all. Okay, so that's what I mean by pressure. So let's look at the question and just eliminate or one by one. During phase 1, so that's what phase 1 is, this phase. Phase 2 is this phase, and phase 3 is this phase. Pressure in the left ventricle decreases, while it increases in the aorta during contraction of the left atrium. So they're saying during this phase, the left ventricle pressure decreases. Let's see, where's the left ventricle? Let's follow this line. Here it is. We can see the pressure in the left ventricle kind of increases, to be honest. It doesn't really decrease. And anyways, if you look at the second part of the question, while it increases in the aorta during contraction of the left atrium, does the aorta pressure increase at any point during phase 1? Look at phase 1. Aorta, down, 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 down. At no point during phase 1 is the aorta's pressure increasing. So there's no way that this one can be correct. while it increases in the aorta during contraction of the left ventricle. So even though the question may seem super difficult, all you have to do is use the logic and say, is the aorta pressure actually increasing at any point? No. So it can't be A. In phase 2, pressure rises in the aorta because the left ventricle is contracting. So they're saying, in this phase, the aorta's pressure increases. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's true. Look, the aorta's pressure is increasing during phase 2. But why is its pressure increasing? So let's look at this diagram. So the aorta is this big red pipe that's sending blood to the rest of your body, right? So they're saying its pressure, so its fullness its fullness with blood is increasing when the left ventricle is contracting. Is that true or not? That is true, because when the left ventricle is contracting, we know the atrioventricular valve is closed to prevent blood from going back into the left atrium, and this valve is open to allow all that blood from the left ventricle to enter the aorta. And as it's entering the aorta, it's increasing the pressure. It's making it more full, right? So that must be true. In phase 2, pressure rises into aorta because the left ventricle is contracting. Yes, I think that's true. In phase 3, pressure decreases in the aorta because the left atrium is relaxing. So is the pressure here decreasing because the left atrium is relaxing? So it is true, the aorta is decreasing, but is it decreasing? The pressure in the aorta is decreasing, but is it decreasing because of the left atrium relaxing? No, it's decreasing because of the left ventricle relaxing. So let's look at it. So the pressure in the aorta is very high, okay? So when it decreases, why does it decrease? So it decreases because the blood, because the ventricle is stopping to contract. Because when the ventricle stops contracting, that means no more blood is entering the aorta. And when no more blood is entering the aorta, the pressure will decrease because all the blood in the aorta is being sent to the rest of your body. So it's slowly getting empty because slowly all the blood is leaving the aorta into these smaller vessels to the rest of your body. Okay, so if the left ventricle stops contracting, that means the aorta will receive less blood, which means its pressure will drop. It's nothing to do with the atrium. The atrium has nothing to do with the aorta. Because when the atrium stops contracting, it is not directly attached to the aorta, so it doesn't influence the aorta. It's rather the left ventricle, okay? That's why C would be incorrect. So how about the last option? In phase 3, there is a constant increase of pressure in the aorta. So immediately right there we can stop and know it's wrong. Because in phase 3, there is a constant decrease in the pressure of the aorta, not an increase. An increase would have been like that, okay? So immediately we can stop there and eliminate that one. Okay, so hopefully this helped. I'll make more of these videos soon.